Oscar Romeo 4, India Sierra Sierra, India Kilo 1 Sierra Lima Delta, Telebridge Station, northwest of Italy, calling for a scheduled Irish contact. Do you copy, Mike? Over.
Italy, this is Mike on the International Space Station. I copy loud and clear. OR4 ISS here.
Okay, Mike, your signal is loud and clear too. Today we are acting as a Telebridge station for Cherry Creek School District near Denver, Colorado. Are you ready for the first question, Mike? Over.
Thank you very much for your help today, and I'm ready to talk to the kids in Cherry Creek, Colorado.
Okay, go ahead, Cherry Creek, with the first question. Over.
Given a choice, what question would you ask an astronaut? Over.
Kavya, that's the very first time I have been asked that question. What a great one. I think mine would be, what's the most amazing thing you've ever seen in space? And I cannot answer that. I assume you wanted an answer. I cannot answer it with one. First I'll have to say, stopping at the end of my sixth spacewalk, I thought it might be my last one, and watching the sunrise. We're working in the darkness on the outside of the space station, watching the world go by at night through the thin bubble of a helmet, and then we watch the lights begin to glow on the horizon as the sunlight starts to spread, creating color bands that stretch wider and wider, and you could see the layers of atmosphere, and it gets brighter starting with the deep blues, purples, and growing into the reds and yellows, and finally the white sun comes over the horizon and just blasts you in the face. It's amazing. The second one for me would be on this trip, which I'd never seen from space before, seeing the northern lights and the southern lights. Not just seeing them as if from a distance, but actually flying through them. It was stunning, really cool. Over.
Why do we need to do research on the moon? Over.
Hey, CJ, there's a lot of great reasons to do research on the moon. The moon's our nearest neighbor, and so it's a great place to practice. We don't know for sure how the moon formed. We know that it's not made of exactly the same stuff as Earth. The best theory is that a big meteor or comet actually had a grazing pass and hit the Earth and gave us a pretty good wallop and knocked off a chunk of Earth that stayed in orbit and then the pieces came together to form the moon. We've barely scratched it with a few landings on the moon and just a few miles of exploration covered there. There's a lot more to learn. And it's also great practice because I think one of the goals, in your lifetime is to see human footprints on Mars. Practicing on the moon that's 3 days away is a great place to get warmed up and ready to go. The moon is hard. Mars is hard. It's about 3 months, 8 months, one direction. Then you need to get there and work, and then turn around and come home. So you'll be gone about 2 years when you go to Mars, and everything has to work right. Over.
How much fuel do you use every day? Over.
That's an interesting question about fuel. We don't use a lot of fuel on a normal basis. Because we just stay in orbit just like the moon stays in orbit. It doesn't use fuel to stay there. We have a little bit of, we make electricity with solar arrays, so we don't need fuel to run generators. We do use a little bit of fuel, and we had a reboost burn yesterday that, just used a couple of 100 pounds of fuel to push us back up, because the moon's out there where there is no air, and we're low enough, we're right at around 400 miles up, and up here there's just a tiny, tiny bit of atmosphere that we run into and slows us down, so we need to give it a push back up every once in a while. Over.
What does space look like from there? Over.
A great question. When you first look out, space looks black and cold. If you get away from the sun and you have the chance to adjust your eyesight, then you see the stars. And for me, I envy you living in Colorado. I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Texas, and I loved the stars, but there was always the city lights in the way. I remember my first trip to the Rocky Mountains where I got to see what the stars looked like without as much atmosphere in between me and them. And it was a big change from where I saw on living close to the ocean. Up here, it's another big change from the Rocky Mountain altitude viewing for stars. It's another big jump to see how clear they are and how clear the Milky Way galaxy really shows up from here. Over.
Have you ever taken animals to the space station? Over.
No, we have not taken animals any bigger than worms or spiders, not real animals up here. I think in a way it's too bad. I'd love to see it. I'd love to have a ship cat. I just think a cat would adjust up here and be a lot of fun. Over.
What happens if you need surgery in space? Over.
If you need surgery in space, we're lucky. We actually have a medical doctor, a surgeon. Satoshi Furukawa is one of my crewmates. So we have somebody here that can do it. Now, actually doing it would be challenging, and we would probably try to avoid doing surgery. We would try to help them out and get them healthy without doing surgery. We would also have an option of getting in our ship and going home if we need to. Of course, that could be dangerous with somebody that's sick and needs surgery. So you bring up a really interesting question, and there is not a simple answer to it. There would be a lot of people working really hard to figure out the best thing to do. So that's a question without an easy answer. Over.
How do you track time in space? Over.
It was a little garbled because I think the question was, how do you keep track time in space? With clocks and you know, we go around the Earth, we have a day and a night every 90 minutes. And so we set a standard time, and that standard time is universal time, what used to regularly be called Greenwich Mean Time. And so we get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is about, it's midnight Denver time. So, you know, that's kind of how our day works. And we have control centers around the world that are all working on our clock and coming to work, you know, in Houston and in Huntsville, Alabama, in Japan and Germany and Moscow, Russia, to all be in mission control while we're there. Over.
What do you think of the solar gray line from space, and do you do specific studies while briefly over the gray line for an over?
Hey, Ryan, it's interesting. It doesn't show up as a gray line like that for us. It shows up as kind of just a time of twilight, and you could see the shadows getting long on the ground. It actually gets to be hard to see the ground because the shadows kind of reflect in the layers of the atmosphere. And we don't do any specific studies right now that I know of studying that, but to me it's kind of interesting to look out there and see the twilight and the dawn moving across the ground. Over.
When did you decide to become an astronaut? Over.
I decided when I was about 12 years old watching the moon landings, and I just decided that was the coolest thing ever, and I wanted to do that. I didn't think it would really come true, but I never gave up on the dream completely, and I kept working hard to pursue that dream and work in that direction. Over.
1 minute to loss.
How big is the space station? Over.
Station is about as big as 7 or 8 school buses. Plenty of room up here. Over.
1 minute to the end. Thank you.
What is the International Space Station used for? Over.
Hey, great question. We built it to perform scientific experiments. On some of those, we're the guinea pigs. Before we can take that 2-year trip to Mars, we have to figure out how to keep our bones and our muscles and our heart and lungs and everything healthy for the whole trip for 2 years. We're just up here for 6 months. So, and there's a lot of other research to investigate combustion or burning
please end the contact, please.
Metallurgy or the growing of metal crystals, scientific experiments, plant experiments. There's tons of things going on. We have over 200 experiments going on. Over.
What conclusions come from the moon research? Over.
I think that one thing that's interesting about the moon research is a possible source of a fusion fuel. Now, that's a way out there kind of thing, but it is something that you could see in your lifetime. The moon's surface traps some rare elements, isotopes that from the solar wind, from the sun actually, that get trapped in the surface of the moon. And there are people that think that it would actually be worthwhile to go to the moon to get that, to use it as fuel in a special kind of nuclear reactor.
Loss of contact from Italy.
Bob and and everyone in the audience. We gave the kids every opportunity, I mean, all the time possible. We didn't break for a big cheer from the audience for Mike Fossum, but very good. He took time today to give detailed answers to the students' questions, and they were all excellent questions, and he really took time today to answer fully each question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've shared a moment of history today with amateur radio station IK1SLD in Italy, operated by Claudio Ariotti. We've made radio contact. We've made radio contact with astronaut Mike Fossum, who's KF5AQG, aboard the International Space Station, and he talked with students there at the Cherry Creek School District in Centennial, Colorado. And now, for the International Volunteer Team of ARIS, this is Gene Chaplin, amateur radio operator K5YFL, sending my greetings to all of you in amateur radio terms. 73, meaning best wishes.